Vineet, did you want to say something? Why don't you go in front here if you want
Yes,
to?
yes. Hi, this is Vineet. I just want to add, what Kavanaugh faced, you talked about, it would have ruined his life. He would not have become a Supreme Court justice. But what we go through in family court has several more factors to it that makes it actually worse. Because number one, we get financially ruined.
That's
Our
right.
health gets ruined from the stress that's caused.
Right.
Our career gets destroyed. We lose our children. And we also stand a very real chance of ending up in jail.
Right.
And also some of the other things, if we are on the child support racket, if we get caught up in that, then we don't get our car registration renewed, we can't get our passports
You can
renewed,
go to jail.
and all of that stuff also.
Yeah.
So we lose so many more things beyond what Kavanaugh was facing. So one of the things you have to realize is what you saw play out was bad enough with Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
But what's going on in family court has several other dimensions, multiple dimensions that makes it far worse.
So
So
Vineet,
it's 20 times worse.
you're talking about this.
1,000 times worse.
And I've only mentioned this off and on in different times that I've talked and with people and so on. But I mean, when my ex-wife got up on the stand, committed perjury, claimed that my grandchildren were not safe about me, said that a person like me, she didn't know to what degree I was violent, but when I killed somebody, it would be too late. All of this stuff I have in a certified transcript. And you know what? The judge almost believed that, except, thank God for cross-examination. Because once the cross-examination happened, all of a sudden, well, you've said this, but here's the evidence that says contrary. And then she started to just wilt. And I mean, at that point in time, to have a judge who said on 2 different occasions she was ready to write this opinion, or she was ready to write the ruling, and it would have been against me because we hadn't even gotten to testify. And then she said, now I've got to look at the evidence. And then at the end she said, Mr. Morgan, none of these things that you're accused of, you're guilty of. And by the way, the testimony against you was inconsistent. It was not credible. In other words, they were lying. And you know what? The same thing, Vineet. I could have had I work in a position that I have to have a certain type of background check, a position of public trust. I would have lost my job. I could have gone into jail. I could have lost my family too because of the hardship that was caused. My wife suffered migraines for a year because of the stress. And that's why I said I'm not going to pursue this because I need to let her get back to health. But after that, I'm going to go after the system.
Yes.
And the judges who do this and the entire corruption that destroys families. I was talking with a grandmother the other day, and she told me that the same thing happened to her. She was just a loving grandmother. And when she lost access to her grandchildren because of these false accusations, she said, Jeff, the pain was so bad, I had a gun to my head. I was in the bathroom for 2 hours, I had the gun to my head. She said, I didn't want to kill myself, but the pain was so terrible. And then finally she dropped the gun. On the positive part then too, she told me, she said, you know what, I couldn't, the pain is indescribable. But then how she also found Jesus Christ through the whole thing. And she says, right now, he has changed my life, he's done this, but the pain is still there. But what you were saying, the false accusation, you are guilty because we have accused you. And Jodi, what I hear you saying is, if a person is guilty, they need to be punished,
Right.
but they need to have some type of due process to find out, are any of these allegations credible?
Right.
I mean, you lost your children and they were kidnapped from you because of an accusation. Vineet, I know your story too, and the things that have gone against. I know my story. I have not seen my grandchildren now for 3.5 years, and it's all because of false allegations, false accusations, and the help of CPS, that corrupt agency. Anyway, but go ahead. Continue further.
Yeah, I just want to, when what you're saying, 2 things came to my mind. The first one is this cookie cutter justice.
Yeah.
And actually, Jeff, you should consider yourself lucky. You got a lucky break because most of us don't.
I know.
Did. Your judge was going to give you the cookie cutter justice, but something that day made her
And
look
you
at the
know what it was,
evidence and
Vineet?
allow you to present evidence, and then that changed her mind. Unfortunately, in many of us, including me,
Yeah.
that never happens.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right, because that's why I've said I've got to fight this, because I made it through. I was one of the my attorney said, do you know how many innocent men sit in jail? But here's what I did, Vineet. And they talked about Brett Kavanaugh. He had his calendar. You know what I used for the evidence? My wife, Karen, was on the stand, and we had picture after picture after picture. And then she got to explain. And everything that my bitter and malicious ex-wife, who, said, because she thought that by being a woman, she would have her testimony heard, evaporated. And the judge had to say, wait a minute, I've got to now look at the evidence. But you're right, cooker-cutty justice is the justice that, it's actually the justice that they wanted against Brett Kavanaugh. You're guilty by accusation.
Yeah.
And I think it has come out of family court. This mentality has been honed and refined and propagated in family court, and now it is reaching out to the levels of where people like Brett Kavanaugh also get to the same thing.
Yeah.
This is just an extension that's come out of 50, 70 years of family court allowing this to happen.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
the second point I wanted to make is, see, what that does is the individual is exposed to such levels of toxic stress and complex trauma. I turned to the global apex expert on this, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, Boston University, and he has a book out in 2014, The Body Keeps Score. And
Yeah.
see, what happens is you're subjecting people to what I call a soul murder, which goes back to World War II concentration camp days.
Right.
But basically, you cause so much stress and psychological pain that eventually the brain can't bear it, and it's a natural coping mechanism where the brain starts to dissociate.
Right.
So you're floating up on the ceiling looking down at this body who's somebody else, it's not you.
Yeah.
And that's the poor guy suffering. You're up there, you're not the one. And that's how the brain copes and escapes from the pain. But the problem is the stress still reverberates throughout your body. The body keeps score.
Yeah.
And that stress is coming in, and then it causes all kinds of a dozen to 24 other problems in the rest of your body, which manifest as a result of that psychological poison.
Yeah.
And this is what's going on. It's a psychological poisoning. It's a psychological gassing. And this is simply unconscionable and unacceptable. And we, the public, will not stand this anymore. This Kavanaugh thing is now the tipping point. And I am hoping to see that there will be very quick accelerated changes coming as a result of what's just played out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
And Vineet, you've talked about the body keeps score. I've been telling people that the body keeps score. You're the first person who said that, mentioned that book to me, The Body Keeps Score. And there are so many ways. It can be through grief that the body keeps score. Certain things that if you're not watching out for yourself, you might think you're fine, but the body keeps score.
Right.
And when you break down, and I mean people that end up with all sorts of health issues because
Right.
the body keeps score. And this is the result of the stress, the trauma, the having to be, when you're falsely accused and you've had a sterling, impeccable reputation for years, and all of a sudden now people look at you like you are a leader of a gang rape train? Seriously? And are my girls safe around you in basketball?
Yeah.
So since you're talking about this body keeps score, I'd like to go ahead and take you one step further. The endocrinology of this is in, there's something called the HPA axis, hypothalamus, which is in your brain, the pituitary gland, which is at the base of your brain, and your adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys. The HPA axis is the chemical control system of the body. This is how the body regulates itself, adapts, and controls itself. And that starts to go haywire. And that is the fundamental, like we have the spinal cord, that is the basic backbone of our whole chemical control system that our bodies run on. And that starts to go haywire. One of the things I just found, a new endocrinology paper that published, it is, Dr. Morse talks about this gender ideology where man and woman genders are being brought to the middle. Men are becoming men/women, and women are becoming women/men, and everybody's coming in the middle. This is translating right down to our biology and our endocrinology. What starts to happen is the women, when they're under stress, their body starts to generate excessive testosterone. And one of the things that's coming out is, like this has been going on in the black community. One of the things you hear is there is so much testosterone in some of these women that they have hairier chests than even men do. And of course, too much testosterone in a woman leads to infertility. It shuts down because the reproductive system is considered not important when the body is under such threat. Everything is about survival, and reproduction is kind of thrown out of the picture.
Yeah.
The same thing happens to men. Their testosterone shuts down, and it causes complete chronic muscle pain, lethargy, unable to do anything.
Yeah.
And of course, in their case also, the end result is infertility because the body says reproductive functions are no longer necessary because it's now all about survival.
Yeah.
So this is kind of all this stuff, the science that is coming out is incredible, which just shows how wrong it is in 1,000 different ways.
Yeah. And
Also, I was gonna say too, when you're that lethargic or, physically ill,
Yeah.
mentally ill, whatever, and you're depressed, you're not getting out of bed, I would guess the unemployment rate would get even lower if they figured this out and stopped this abuse to our families.
Right.
Because there's a lot of us that were not working. I just, for one, was off work for 21 months.
Yeah.
And I never wanted to go get work until this child joined the National Guard, and
Yeah.
when she wrote me that first letter
Yeah.
is when I started looking for work.
I remember that, and I was gonna ask you. You went through this whole thing about the survival mode,
Right?
and I mean, it was sometimes barely surviving,
Yeah, barely.
and
yeah.
now,
I've been on my knees crying, please God, take me in the night.
Yeah.
Please God.
well, I remember, and I hope this doesn't get too personal here, but I remember at least one time that you called me,
Yeah.
and that you were really on the edge,
Yeah.
and I was saying, don't do it.
Yeah, it's been bad.
Yeah,
It's been
it's
real
been
bad.
very
And then,
bad.
I get so many calls from other people
Yeah.
saying they want to end their life, and I posted those pictures of my daughter graduating and that reuniting, and I don't know
Yeah.
if it's for good. Sometimes it goes back and forth,
Right?
So I still have my walls up. I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And,
But
I
their
wanted
body
to
is
post
keep.
it because it gives
Yeah.
them hope, kind of.
But their body is also keeping score too. So what
definitely.
Vineet is talking about, we always we look at it from our perspective, but even there are other people that are affected that we sometimes maybe they don't have a voice for themselves.
Right. My
Maybe-
mother's a mess from this.
Yeah.
And she actually was able to see the children after 500 days.
Yeah.
But she's been a mess from that.
Yeah.
Mentally, physically. And it, like, Vineet and I have studied, about the ACE study, and it lowers your life expectancy by 20
Right.
years. I totally believe it.
Yeah.
One of my twins, the one that did not, go through the guard yet, said she's sick all the time.
Yeah.
And I said, I bet you're going to start getting better. Just have a relationship with me. I'm not saying it's a magical cure,
Yeah.
but there's no reason for us not to be around each other because you need a mom, you need a dad,
Yeah.
and this will help you in the long run. So,
Yeah, and let me add to that as well. I had a daughter that, the one who actually, I don't know whether she was brainwashed by her mother or what, but filed the charges against me. Here she is in the hospital, just completely broke down, and nobody told me. She was under my insurance. I kept her insured, even though she made those allegations. She was still under my insurance, and I think she ended up paying cash for some of those things. They hated me so badly for whatever reason. Their hatred and their vindictiveness and their malice was so bad that they would let their daughter or their granddaughter suffer rather than let me be a father.
right.
And it's despicable.
Yeah. That's like the one daughter I was just talking about fell at a cheerleading event
Yeah.
and had to have reconstructive surgery. I didn't know until last week, a year later,
Yeah.
that she shredded all of her cartilage
Yeah.
and she'll never be the same. She's also had female issues I won't go into.
Yeah.
I should have been told all this. And
Yeah.
then the twin that did graduate said, did you know I had a 3rd-degree burn from my workplace? No, I didn't. She goes, it got infected because my dad didn't take me to the hospital. Oh, well, I wonder why the judge said he's a superior parent then.
Yeah.
Actually,
It's incredible. And she
Yeah.
goes, now it'll never be healed. I mean, it probably won't. Anyway,
Yeah.
No.
if he would have taken her early
Yeah.
when he was supposed to,
Yeah.
instead of playing Xbox,
Yeah.
she might not have had the
And trying
scars
to
big.
keep you from her
Exactly.
so that she could make himself look good.
the ACEs study, one other factor that I've discovered is ACEs begets other ACEs. So
Right.
when you have a situation where there is abuse going on.
And ACEs is
it's
the adverse childhood experiences.
Yes, yes, and it brings on the other ACEs.
Right.
So once you have one, it just kind of, they all come in one after the other because the situation is ripe for that.
Right. And that's,
The other thing is, we talked about the victims. See, the children are the worst victims because at least as an adult, the human brain is matured by 26 years of age. These children's brain isn't even mature and you're subjected to this trauma.
Yeah.
So the way they are suffering is even far worse because it's interrupting their normal brain development.
so as you know, Vineet, we're trying to repeal unilateral divorce, the forced divorce in Texas. But one of the things that people don't talk about is that divorce affects grandchildren. We always talk about what we call the nuclear family, the mother, father, the son, daughter, and everything. But more and more research is coming out and saying divorce affects grandchildren. ACEs begets ACEs.
Yeah. My mother, their grandmother hasn't seen them since 2002, so that would be 16 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these children were, when they saw their grandmother, they were 4 and 2 years old.
Yeah.
So they have pretty much been, and at that age, they're still babies.
Yeah.
And the influence of a grandparent is not fully in play.
Yeah.
And they've completely have been cut out of that.
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah. And I mean, this all started, we started part of this conversation because of what happened with Brett Kavanaugh and because of the idea that we should have some type of due process, something. People make mistakes. I'm not saying that I'm not taking any side here or anything, but I'm just saying people do make mistakes. Right. Not everything is criminal. And there are some things that are criminal. But do you automatically have to be held guilty? And when you hold one person guilty, you may think, I'm just targeting him or I'm just targeting her. But actually what you are doing, you are targeting an entire family. You are targeting children,
multiple
grandchildren.
Generations. Let me point out
Right.
to you. See, what happens is, the way I figured it, it's at least a minimum of 5 generations of the family. It starts with the grandparents.
Yeah.
They are traumatized and, brutalized by this.
Right.
The parent obviously is.
Yeah.
The worst is for the children whose
Right.
immature brain has to put up with this without even the full facility of brain being fully mature.
Yeah.
But then at least the next 2 generations that aren't even conceived yet or born yet are already, there is hell on earth waiting for them. They are going to arrive into a psychological mess, a toxic psychological mess. They'll be born into that and they are completely innocent.
Yeah.
Why should they be brought into this? But this is what is happening. And it's at least minimum of 2 generations, if you're lucky, before some of the worst effects of this can kind of work their way out of this, out of the family. But in many cases, it's going to go even beyond those 2 unborn generations. So, so my thing is minimum 5 generations are being impacted, probably a couple more.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not acceptable.
Right, it's completely unacceptable.